are listening to the most original talk radio station anywhere. We are LA Talk Radio at latalkradio.com.
You're listening to Cannabis Nation with your hosts, Mike Booten and Julie Rose, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Welcome, Cannabis Nation.
And welcome to Cannabis Nation. It's time for an honest conversation about marijuana. Listeners can go to the guest info page on our website, cannabisnationradio.com, to get more information about tonight's guest, Brian Odea, and be sure to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/reformwarrior.
You know, Julie, there are a few ways to gauge the total amount of marijuana smuggled into the U.S. in any given year. One is to extrapolate using federal seizures. Another would be to extrapolate using intelligence gathered both domestically and abroad of production and supply data. Still another would be to use a consumption-based model and extrapolate from there, but underreporting is likely to affect the final number's accuracy. And having said that, the ONDCP, or Office of National Drug Control Policy, using its two estimates derived for foreign and domestically produced marijuana, estimated the street availability of marijuana in 2001 to be between 10,000 and 24,000 pure metric tons. I'm pretty sure that's probably gone up since then, at least domestically.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of marijuana any way you look at it. And, of course, it probably doesn't take into consideration the amount of marijuana that's also grown at home or indoors these days. But, you know, Mike, another way to judge it would be to ask a marijuana smuggler. It just so happens that today we are fortunate to have with us former international marijuana smuggler Brian Odea. And Brian grew up in Newfoundland, and after suffering the abuse of a Catholic priest, he got into drugs and eventually into employing 120 people and smuggling 75 tons of marijuana into the United States over time. Eventually, he was arrested and sentenced to 10 years in a federal penitentiary. Upon release, Brian got involved in film and television and now lives in Toronto. There is much more. For instance, Brian used to have a morning radio show, but we'll let Brian tell us more about himself. And welcome to Cannabis Nation Radio, Brian.
Thanks, Julie. Hi.
Hey, Brian, welcome. We made
Hi,
some
Mike.
pretty
Thank you.
We made some pretty big strides in that intro, so if you want, why don't you pick up and fill in whatever gaps you want and sort of help us understand how you became a marijuana smuggler.
Well, you know, I liked pot, basically, is what happened. I smoked a joint when I was in university. Someone turned me on to it. I'd see these hippies down at this coffee shop by the university where I was going. And I was intrigued by them. They had a sense about them of, you know, it just didn't matter. And that just intrigued me. Anyway, a year of observing that and turning down drugs, I decided to try and smoke a joint. And after, you know, on the third joint, I got whacked.
That's good.
It just, from that point on, I guess I didn't look back. You know, for the next year, I blew through my tuition money, my rent money, my food money, my any money on dope for me and the guys. And when the money ran out, my main concern was trying to figure out how I was going to get some dope.
You mean marijuana?
Yeah.
Wow, it really. Well, I mean, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it almost sounds like you'd had a really, really. What is even the word I'm searching for? A very dramatic impact on your life then.
Oh, it did. I loved it. And, you know, we all loved it. And I had money that I should have been using for something else that I apparently didn't mind spending on that.
Right. Okay. Anyway, sorry.
So I became everybody's best friend. And my place was where everybody hung out. And then so when the money went away and I couldn't pay rent or food or any of that, I went to the guy that sold me the dope, and I asked him to front me some, which he did. and I cut it into smaller pieces and sold it to the people I'd been giving it away to. I, at the end of the day, had some for myself for free. And 20 years later, that was 75 tons in a ship.
Yeah.
But the funny
How
thing
did that
is,
happen, you know? I didn't mean for that to happen.
But the funny thing is what you described, though, is exactly, I think it must be the way it happens for everyone, except just you just went to a further lengths. You escalated, you know, I mean, because that sounds like almost everybody I ever know that's ever bought or sold a little sack of marijuana.
Yeah, you know, it became what I did, basically. My father was in the booze business. He owned a brewery. He owned a couple of them.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so the apple didn't fall far from the tree, really.
I was actually
So you came from an entrepreneurial family, too. So.
An entrepreneurial family that was in the mind-altering business.
Yeah, right.
Right, that's what I was going to ask you. That's what I was going to ask you about the brewery part of it. I was going to ask you how did being around alcohol and that that volume and that sort of commerce impact your life and in later years in terms of how you viewed sobriety? Did that sort of help you to feel like doing other things were okay?
You know, I never really had an alcohol problem, so I had a one-drink problem, but I never craved a drink. But the problem was when I had a drink, I would think it was okay to do a little Coke.
Oh, bummer.
There's no such thing as a little Coke, right? There's a little more Coke, maybe, but there's no such thing as a little Coke. Right. So, you know, when I decided that cocaine had to go, then it was just easiest for me to get rid of everything.
Right.
And but I don't have a problem with alcohol, or I don't have a problem with anything today.
Right, right.
I don't have a problem with anybody putting anything in their body that they want to as an adult human being. It's your business. It's not my business. And, you know, it's not, as far as I'm concerned, even open to discussion. Whatever anyone wants to put in their body is their own particular personal issue. Right. And until it bleeds over onto me in the form of invasive behavior, you know, you're pretty much on your own. Yeah. If you need any help, you can always ask, but I'm not going to.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's exactly right.
But actually, before you got busted, you when you gave up on smuggling, you turned into you went into drug counseling. Is that right?
I did. Yeah. Well, you know, basically, can I give you just a little rundown of how it kind of happened?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. I got out of the business. You know, I tried to get sober in 1984 because I was just having the worst kind of coke issues, and for years coke was fun. You know, for like 14 years or so, I did it. It was a blast. Everybody was doing it. It was awesome. We were having a great time, and then it seemed like it turned on everybody at the same time. It just became the enemy. And anyone who was doing it got in trouble with it. You know, guys were hiding in bathrooms, wrapping from head to toe in tinfoil and shit. I mean,
oh, man.
Wow.
Yeah, I saw some pretty wacky stuff.
No, you know what? It's funny that I mean, what you just said sort of triggered something in my mind. It 14 years is a long time to do something like cocaine and not actually have it be a problem. And then everybody sort of all of a sudden had the problem at the same time. I wonder if there was some change in the processing of at the base source or something, and maybe that was the trigger. No,
I can suggest that probably isn't the case because
okay.
I take it from the beginning. You know, I controlled it from the plant to the product myself, and nothing changed there. But I think it was just the vibration. I think it just our planetary vibe had enough of it.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you.
The enemy.
I was going to ask you about that because in the, listen, I'm not going to try to come off like the only thing I've ever done is marijuana. I've done a little bit of high quality cocaine, a time or two. And that's not my thing now, but the one thing that I saw a lot of in anybody that used it is that, you could have these mood swings that are just super crazy. And you had 120 people employed. And I'm thinking that when you've got that much going on and it's all illicit, it's all very high stakes game, that cocaine couldn't have made things a lot of fun around the office sometimes.
No, actually, that last deal that we had, part of the deal was no one did coke. If you did coke, you were out.
Mm.
And so we didn't do coke. There was one guy who couldn't stop doing coke, and we had to get rid of him. And he turned into a nightmare.
It could even be alcohol. Could have been a nightmare too.
Well, the booze bone's connected to the coke bone, Julie, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just as simple as that. You do stupid things when you do that shit. And so, one of the guys, he couldn't stop showing up in limos with hookers and coke and booze, just making, drawing so much heat down on us. So when we got rid of him, he turned into a problem. Ultimately, he ended up going to the DEA, and they watched us with the whole back end of the load, which was 50 tons. And the day before we offloaded it, we found out they were watching us. So we orchestrated something for them to look at while we figured out what to do.
Right.
And
I think that was a common occurrence that took place back in the day of dumping a load down shore and bringing up something down the shore a little ways. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. Well, this was huge. I mean, we had 3 big ships up there, and we had 110 people, like I think one of the guys said a little bit earlier. And on those ships, at that point, when they were sorting that 50 tons, there were, probably about 35 people. So we had a lot of responsibility on our shoulders when we discovered that they were watching us, and to decide what to do. Do we dump the load and just bring them down, or is there a way to? Because we in listening to them on the radio, knew that they were looking for us. They didn't know where we were. We immediately went and hired next DEA agent to get some information. He was a private detective. And he was able to fill us in to the extent, he was able to give us just the very small amount of information, but it was the perfect amount of information to make us realize that we could pull it off. And what was that? That was 2 things, basically. One, we knew that they knew, but they didn't know that we knew they knew. Okay?
I'm feeling you.
The single critical bit of information. 2, they didn't know anything about my trucking company. I had 5 tractor trailers they knew nothing about that was picking this pot up. So what they knew was where we were going to offload, which was our offload situation up in Washington. They knew we were bringing it into Alaska and hiding up there, sorting the stuff out, repackaging it, barcoding everything. They knew we were doing that up there, but they couldn't find us because we were well hidden. And once we got on to them looking for us, we were able to. And we realized that those 2 things, that they didn't know anything about the trucks, and they didn't know anything, and they didn't know that we knew they knew. We got a friend's boat, went up and took it off the boat that it was on, that they were looking for. And we sailed it back down, and we moved our offload to the main port in downtown Bellingham on a Saturday morning at 6 o'clock. We pulled in there in a 160-foot boat that we had. This was the new boat. It was 240 foot. And we pulled in there and just started offloading what looked like fish into the back of our trucks. And in 5 hours, we had 50 tons en route to California. And while we were doing that, the moment the boat pulled into the dock, we pulled the 3 boats of ours that they were looking for out into the open, and they were flying up and down the inside passage regularly looking for our boat. And when they spotted them, they went nuts. We're on them. And so they got orders to stay off until we hit the Canadian border coming into the U.S. We crossed from Canada into the U.S. coming down the inside passage. Now, we had 3 big boats. We had a 100-footer, a 160-footer, a 58-footer, fully crewed. And so it was a big job. And the moment we hit that border, buddy, there was 100 cops from every stripe, the DEA, the FBI, ATF, Navy, Coast Guard, helicopters, boats. It was just unbelievable. And there was fresh coffee and donuts on the boats, and that was it. And they freaked out.
Oh man!
Because
that's it. That's all they found was fresh coffee and donuts.
That's right. The pot was already in warehouses in California.
That's awesome.
So when you're dealing with that much volume, how did you deal with the smell?
Well, it was Thai pot. The smell wasn't bad. It had to have a distinct odor, that's for sure, but it had kind of a chocolatey top to the smell.
Mm-hmm.
And but what we did was we would just put it in the trucks and fill the back of the trucks with aromatic cedar.
Oh, good idea.
And the way bills for the trucks were, we were carrying nothing but aromatic cedar. So when you open the back door of those trucks, you got this big smell of very fresh, perfumed cedar that just knocked your socks off.
Yeah, which is going to completely drown out that Thai.
Yeah, and Thai pot in the 80s, it's not like today where, if you open the back of the truck, you think you had a herd of skunks up in there.
Right,
but,
right.
The pot smelled completely different.
No, that's exactly right. Hey, one thing that was interesting I thought was kind of weird, and I don't know, it was probably maybe an earlier time when you were just getting going, I don't know, but I read that you smuggled weed from the UK into Canada. That just seems kind of weird, but you could tell me about that maybe.
That was hash.
Oh, hash, okay.
That was hash, yeah. When I first got into it, weed was a rarity. Hash was, in Canada, hash was a drug. Weed came from the U.S. It came from Texas and places south of there,
Right.
So, and there was some weed out on the West Coast in Canada, out in British Columbia, but, I lived in Newfoundland, which was 5,600 miles away from British Columbia. And
right.
So when I started getting involved, I would go to first Nova Scotia, and but they charge a fortune there, so I go up to Toronto, and I'd go to Toronto, but they'd say, "Here come the Newfies," and in Canada, the Newfoundlanders are kind of the joke, the Newfie joke, and that's, however. It's really untrue how we're portrayed through those jokes, but that's not the point. They would charge us more. So a friend of mine said one day back in Newfoundland, listen, I've got friends over in England. A friend of mine was from England. He said, my mate's over there. You should go talk to him and see what you can do. Because at that point I was paying I think around $1,000 a kilo for hash in Toronto. And I go to England, and I could get it for a couple of $100 a kilo.
Wow.
And, I could just strap 10 keys on my body and bring it back with no problem, which I did. And then I mailed some to myself. I like to say they don't call it dope for nothing.
Yeah, it was a lot easier time to do that sort of thing. I mean, you could smoke on an airplane, for crying out loud.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I mailed some actually to a non-existent person to the house next door, and the cops delivered it to me and charged me with it. And they drummed up evidence, even though I will admit that was mine.
Right.
They had to manufacture the evidence to convict me, which they did. Right. And I got 19 months for that in 1972. So when I got out of there, I just said, fuck it, I'm getting in the business. And I took off for Jamaica and South America and got in.
Wait a minute. So you got out of prison and you said, screw it, now I'm really going to go. Isn't that like counterintuitive?
Yeah. I said, you know what? Look, I'll tell you what happened. When I went to prison, this was a great prison, too. This prison had no running water, no toilets. Hey, you used buckets. It was just, you had one visit every 2 weeks for 20 minutes, no phone calls. It was bizarre. Built in the 1700s, called Her Majesty's Penitentiary in St. John's, Newfoundland. So I got 19 months in there, okay? And before I went in, I married this young lady, and which was a stupid thing to do. Her uncle was my judge, and, that wasn't why I married her, but it just so happened that he was. It didn't help.
Wait, her uncle was your judge, and you couldn't do better than 19 months?
Yeah, right. It didn't. Like I said, it didn't help.
No, sometimes you have to go harder on family. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
That you're not going light.
So I go in, and every day I work down in the laundry in there, okay? And in the laundry, I can look out over the backyard of the prison, which is sloping on a hill, over a lake, to the other side of the lake where there's a road that drives by this graveyard. And every day she would park over there for an hour while I was working down there in the morning so I could see her. It was, that's how intense it was. And it went from that to the day before I was getting out on parole. I got called up to the visiting room because I got accepted for parole after 6 months of my sentence. They were going to give me parole. So I was supposed to get out the next day, and I got called up to the visiting room, and there was my wife sitting with the classification officer of the prison who fucking hated me, and because I was a dope fiend. And she said, "You're not going to like why I'm here, but I'm leaving you." And my jaw hit the deck.
Wow.
And so she just flipped and came down and left me. She hired the lawyer who prosecuted me for her divorce.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what the judge said who handled our divorce. He said, "What is up with that?"
Yeah, what happened? She was a She was a pinup girl leaning on a car, and now she's like, oh, my word.
The judge came all over that lawyer in my divorce proceedings, I must say. I felt very vindicated by that. Anyway, so she left me, and I went back down to my cell, and I'm figuring, fuck it, I'm going to get out tomorrow. I can fix this anyway. I'll go see her and fix it. She's just having a moment here, and I'll fix it. So the next day, normally if you're getting out, they called me down. They gave me my civilian clothes, and I was waiting for my release papers, which normally happen before lunch, because they don't want to have to make any extra food and feed extra mouth if they don't have to. And so normally you're out by lunch if you're out that day. Well, I'm in the lunch lineup in my civilian clothes wondering what the heck's going on. And in the lunch lineup is where they hand you your mail. And as I'm going through the lunch lineup, the guard, hands me my mail. And it is nothing but a piece of paper folded over, stapled together where it's folded. So I take the staple out and open it up, and there are just 2 words written on the paper. It's a penitentiary issued letterhead, and it says parole revoked.
Oh, man.
So I went fucking ballistic. I went nuts, and they locked me up. And, for a couple of weeks, I thought I just wanted to die, basically. And I was lying in my bunk one night, and I rolled over and I fell out of the bunk, and I knocked a book off the little desk right against the bunk, and it fell on the floor, and a card fell out of that book. And that card was the business card that was handwritten on the back, a guy's name, the name of a restaurant in Bogota, and the address.
Oh, my word.
And I had met this guy, Benny, in Montreal, and he said, hey, if you ever want to do any real business, man, come and see me. And, just go to this restaurant, find Juan, he owns it, and he'll know where I am at any time. And I said, all right. I'll do that maybe someday. So I had a friend pick me up. It just struck me then when I saw that card.
Right.
It struck me. Wait a minute. Now I know when I'm getting out of here for sure. It's not parole. My sentence will be over at a certain date, and that's the date they got to let me go. 2, I got no wife. 3, I got no parole officer. I can do whatever the fuck I want. Fair enough. I'm going to Colombia. So I had a friend pick me up the day I got out of prison and went straight to the airport. He gave me $500, and I got on a plane and went to Colombia.
Right, because once you're an inmate, it's not like you're going to be able to go play the little merry-go-round game and catch back up again, right?
Well, I needed to do something to kickstart my life.
Right.
So I needed to make something happen. So I wanted to go down and look this guy up, who was nowhere to be found, I might add. But the fellow he worked for was, and he thought it was the most hilarious thing he'd ever heard, that I would show up there with $500 looking to do a deal.
You had
$500?
What do you want, a cam?
He just flipped. He just thought, man, he said, you got the biggest balls of anybody I've ever met coming and seeing me with $500 in your pocket. And I said, hey, listen, I got nothing. Understand that. I borrowed that money on the way here from my friend who picked me up from prison. Okay? I'm trying to get my life started. So I don't know what else to do but come and grab it by the fucking horn. So either you're with me or you're not. Come on.
Well, it definitely shows that you're a self-starter. It definitely shows that you're not afraid of an uphill task, and you're willing to, put some skin in the game.
Well, he figured, okay, this is a guy who had a manufacturing facility that manufactured suitcases with false bottoms with many kilos in them. And, he gave me 50 grams, not 1 fucking gram more, which he could have given me.
Wait, 50 grams?
Grams, yeah.
That much.
Wow.
And he said, so here, take that 50 grams and you can go back. I know you're going to go back to Newfoundland. You're going to cut it. You're going to sell. You probably end up with somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000, depending on how much of it you snort. You do that and come back and talk to me. So I did that. And I came back and talked to him. And he took me and showed me the suitcase manufacturing facility and gave me one of those suitcases.
I'll bet he had in mind an amount of money that would be an acceptable amount to bring back. Kind of like that old parable of the talents, Each servant was given a talent and told to go do something with it, right?
Right.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What was that you said? Someone just knocked on the door there.
No, it's no problem. We could just move on because I was actually looking at my notes and I sort of forgot actually what we were talking about myself. So,
I'm in the middle of your book. I haven't made it all the way through it yet, but in your book you said something about a friend of yours that was actually in a country that didn't have extradition with the United States, and the DEA actually kidnapped him, brought him to another country that did have extradition. They drugged him and kidnapped him.
Yeah, Danny.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, Danny was in Costa Rica, and they wanted him. Danny was the original Thai smuggler. He was the first. He was the man. And they wanted him badly, so they went and grabbed him in Costa Rica, drugged him, put him on a plane, flew him to Mexico and got him off the plane in Mexico, and then had him arrested in Mexico and proceeded to have him extradited to the United States, where he got 75 years.
Wow. 75 years. You know what's crazy about that? Here's the funny thing about drugs, from my perspective. Okay, I'm not a real proponent of hard drug use. I'm all for ending the drug war, period. I would settle for cannabis, being freed. But the fact is that we've already known from experts on this show that 2% of any population are going to be addictive, and they're going to be addicted to something. And we also know that people are going to do what they're going to do. And so, in a sense, a world without drugs would be a lot worse than the world with drugs. It's just a matter of how to control them, how to reduce the harm. And that's one of the things I wanted to add.
You can start by stop calling the people who do them criminal. That's how you can start.
Right.
That's a pretty safe place to start. Listen, look, let's just understand something. Drugs are not going to be legalized.
No.
And I'll tell you why. Because the United States, the individual states of the Union, are about to shake hands with the devil in a way that they've never done before. In that they're about to sell all of their state prisons to the Corrections Corporation of America.
Oh, I heard something about that. That is so frightening, it's not even funny.
So here's the proposal. The Corrections Corporation of America has made an offer to every state in the Union to purchase their prisons with one condition only, and they will give them good money for those prisons. And the condition is that they guarantee 80% occupancy for 20 years. So if the drug laws were to change, we've got a good 60% of the occupants in prison are in there in drug-related crimes.
I heard it was 80, actually. Well, that might just be federal prison.
Yeah.
But either way, that's a lot. And see, you brought up something that is just oh my word, I could go on all day about it alone. The idea that we would incarcerate people for profit is so repugnant in a free and open society, especially when it's over an issue that is really, I guess you could argue that it does harm to people, but in a sense, really.
It's over a crime by definition, buddy.
Right.
It's over a crime by definition.
Right.
It's over a crime by the state defining somebody's behavior as crime because the state thinks it's your daddy and has to protect you from yourself and others. What the state doesn't realize is that you're all grown up and you're going to do it whether they say you can or can't. The day they legalize all drugs, is that the day that you're going to go out and get in the heroin lineup? I don't think so.
No.
I'm not going to either, by the way.
No.
And but all those who are already in that heroin lineup, being pushed through the keyhole of illegal activity to get it, they're going to be in that lineup, and they're going to be looking for that legally distributed drug. And at the same time, they're going to get a belly full of options to do otherwise. Not one of which involves incarceration.
Right, and I bet it's all a lot cheaper than the whole dog and pony show of incarceration, but...
Well, I just finished this movie called How to Make Money Selling Drugs. That's going to be released in...
oh, yeah.
It's going to be released in Tribeca Film Festival in New York in April. And
I can't wait to see that.
Well, we had a great showing, a really hugely successful showing of that film here at the Toronto International Film Festival. It was awesome. Tickets were being scalped for $250 a seat. It was just incredible.
I'm sorry. I had completely forgotten that, but I'd seen the trailer for that somewhere on TV, and correct me if I'm wrong. There's a lot of people in it. One of them, 50 Cent, and who are some of the other people in it? Ricky Ross,
Ariana Huffington, Freeway, Ricky Ross, 50 Cent, me, Bobby Carlton.
I saw a little trailer.
Barry Cooper, Susan
awesome.
Sarandon.
I saw this.
Woody Harrelson,
trailer for it. It's not that I like this movie or I'm dying to see it because it's like, oh my word, I got to know how to make money selling drugs. No, I love the approach and the perspective that you're coming from and having these people lay it out so that naive and misled people can understand that there's consequences to actions we take, to our political actions. And I'm not going to give it away but I think it's going to be a great, great film.
Well, thank you. And it is a great film. I'm very happy with it.
Good.
We're now working on a new how-to, the next how-to. Matthew Cook, the director, and I'm actually helping him produce this one. And this is how to get rich in prison. So that
own one.
Fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
How to get rich in prison.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that should be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you a couple more questions about that, actually, because your first prison experience wasn't your last. Your last one was in the federal penitentiary here in the States, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the questions I had about that were, did the stature of your crime make for any juice on the inside? You know what I mean? That you were like, a big player. Or did it even matter to anybody that you ran a big ship?
What it did was it defined who my peeps were in there.
Oh, okay.
We were called the Jet Set. And when they shut down the Southeast Asia connection, they shut everybody down at the same time. So consequently, there were a ton of us in prison at the same time who were all connected somehow in Southeast Asia. And so there, out of the 13, there was built for 400, and there was almost 1,200 people in there.
Wow.
And we had a group of about 30 guys who were all kind of pot smugglers from Southeast Asia that we all hung together.
Interesting. I wonder, did you ever meet Joe Pietri? Do you know who he is? Who? He was Joe Pietri, a fellow from New York that just written a book called The King of Nepal. His thing was hash smuggling.
I think so. That's a very familiar name.
Yeah, I've always wondered when I talk to guys like you. I've talked to Black Tuna Bobby, and of course I've stayed at Joe's house. We're friends. And I've always wondered, sort of when I start thinking about that, how many people knew each other either from the game or from the penitentiary.
Well, you know what? There are a whole lot of penitentiaries.
Yeah, that's true too.
I used to I worked in the staff training center in the Terminal Island in Long Beach. So I saw all of the publications that came in for these cops who worked in these joints, because they all went through this facility to get trained to go work in the prison system. All the federal cops who were going to work in the Western District went through this training facility that I worked at as a prisoner. And I used to get the population report on my desk every week. And every place, buddy, built for 400, housing 900, built for 500, housing 1,400, and on and on and on.
All right, living in cots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Living on the freeway.
Wow.
Well, one little aspect of prison and you and your story, I read that when you started getting into film and TV, you worked on this show Redemption, and it was actually filmed around men being released from incarceration. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I produced this television show for CBC in Canada called Redemption Inc. And Redemption Inc. was like Survivor for ex-cons. There were actually 2 women and 8 men. And through a series of events and a number of shows, 9 in particular in the first season, we arrived at 3 people standing. And through their presentation for their business ideas, one of them walks away with $100,000, and this billionaire host, one of the guys from Shark Tank on ABC, a guy named Kevin O'Leary, with him as a partner. And in actual fact, in season 1, a woman won it. A woman
All right.
who had five crack houses.
Wow.
She's such an awesome,
God.
incredible human being.
Yeah.
Yeah, she just never did crack in her life, by the way. Never did drugs.
Interesting.
Said, you never did drugs? And she said, no, man, I saw what it did to people, and I didn't want to do that to myself.
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting.
I got to tell you, that's one of the biggest reasons that I really never did, very many hard drugs or did them in very, health-threatening ways was exactly that. It was exactly that reason. I mean, when
you're not an addict right there. When you say something like that, I know you're not an addict.
Right. No, I mean, I'll never forget it. One of the most disgusting things I've ever seen in my life was watching a person shoot up heroin in Fresno. And it was so bizarre. I'd never been around it. I'd never seen that before. And when I watched all of the preparation and this ritual and the behavior beforehand, and then you could just watch this drug wash over this person, and then it was, I couldn't get out of there fast enough, I swear to God.
Mm-hmm. It was really odd in prison. You'd know when heroin was going to hit the yard, because all the junkies would be scurrying around that yard like a bunch of ants. Shit, getting ready, trying to line up some money from somewhere to get some, so they're going to get some of it,
Right. That's so pathetic.
You could just watch them scurrying. And then you'd know it was on the yard because they'd all be, as they say, sitting around sucking dick. And that means they'd sucking their own dicks. They would be just with their heads practically in their own laps, drooling, sitting on the benches around the yard.
Yeah. And it's not like the guards can't see this going on, right? They just overlook it.
The guards are bringing it in, probably.
Probably.
Well, there's certain guards who do help, of course.
Sure.
Here's how it works. They have piss tests. They happen randomly, and they happen all the time. And that's how they handle it, Unless there are people dying on the yard, you'll get pulled up in a piss test, and you'll get shuffled off to Buffalo, You go to a higher grade incarceration if you get busted with some drugs in there.
Yeah, but
not a good thing.
I say every week, if I have time, I say, we can't keep drugs out of prisons, and you're driving that point home for me. I mean, it's astonishing how obtuse we are about this.
Drugs, alcohol, and I don't know.
In the game of smuggling, is the adrenaline an addiction or the money more of an addiction?
We just had fun.
Yeah.
We were just having a good time.
Yeah.
We were like a bunch of boys playing with great big boats and planes and in big trucks, What can I say?
Do you think
out of the sandbox?
Do you think anybody still operate, with that kind of size and that kind of move, that kind of weight now, with all the heightened security since 9/11?
Are you kidding me? No one's moving.
I know.
I used to go see a guy and pick up $10 million from him. No one does that anymore. Everything is in 5-pound increments, 10-pound increments. Look, where there used to be 10 major importers from Southeast Asia, there used to be 10 major importers from Southeast Asia.
Right.
There are now 10,000 growers, 50,000 growers. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's no longer pot is no longer being imported in the United States. It's being grown.
Yeah,
in the
it's too
United
bulky.
States.
Right.
And it's being grown by mom and pop operations.
Right.
It's being grown by very small facilities. And these facilities turn over 10, 15, 20 pounds every 6 weeks. And pot is sold in those kind of increments now. There's no one walking around with $10 million in his pocket anymore to pick up,
Except maybe, I don't know, what's going on in Mexico, though. I mean, they've got to have some stuff going on to have the kind of action it's so much more violent.
Well, they grow it here now.
And it's coke primarily is what fuels that, and heroin. The cartel, there is grass, but, people, for the most part, people don't like smoking Mexican weed anymore.
No.
Right.
Any weed in a pinch, but hey,
Yeah, but, not many people in that much of a pinch.
Right, not anymore. I mean, back in the day. Hey, we got about 4 minutes left, Brian. I wish we could spend more time, but I could give you maybe a minute and a half to 2 minutes to, maybe tell us something that you want to get out there that we didn't ask you about.
Look, we're all grown-ups. We're all adults. The laws should change. They're probably not going to. The moment that we see private prisons taking over our prisons, you can guarantee that drug laws are never going to change.
Right.
So I don't know what to say to people. I respect your right to put in your body whatever the heck you want, and I hope you're able to deal with whatever that is. And I'm appalled at our readiness to take the weakest among us, brand them with the indelible stain of criminality, and change their lives forever because we don't approve of what they're putting in their body from a weak point of view. It's just atrocious behavior, and I'm appalled to be a part of the same species that behaves like that with its brothers and sisters.
Yeah, I think it's barbaric. I really do. I just think that, we can do better. We can do better. I hope that Colorado and Washington, shocking the world on Tuesday, is going to mean that if you're right about the prison thing, that if, the private prison industry takes over all of the, former state facilities, that at least by the time they do it, that marijuana will be carved out of the dog and pony show. And I still won't like the fact that I won't like our drug control policy, but at least I won't be a victim of it anymore.
Well, you saw what the governor of Colorado said, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That he doesn't have to do anything.
Right.
He doesn't have to legalize marijuana.
No, I guess we're going to listen. I hate to let you go, but we just got a couple minutes now, and so we're going to have to say goodbye. But thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for having me. Thanks, Julie.
Okay, we'll be in touch.
All right, good night, Brian. So, guys, Brian, he made my point for me, that I make every week, and that we can't keep marijuana out of maximum security prisons. So how are we going to keep them out of a free and open society? We're not. We need a new approach.
Yep, that's right, Mike. And every time we hear about the smuggling of marijuana, it is a story of more, not less. It's guys like Brian and others like him who are only meeting a demand. And the demand is here, and the chance of getting caught do not outweigh the potential monetary gains that can be garnered servicing this market. So the question becomes, if the demand is here and it is not going away, the war on drugs is not working, and all of this money is going to people who aren't necessarily very nice these days. Why are we not killing two birds with one stone? Legalize and regulate and keep those jobs and that money in our country going to good people. Let the market decide. Let the doctors decide. And if you're in Washington or Colorado, a doctor is no longer required. Let the police go after real criminals.
Yep, we've seen this movie back in the 20s. Enough already, okay? I mean, you know what? They had a medicinal alcohol when Prohibition started, so enough already. All right, everyone. Until next week, you know what? Be safe out there, and good night from Cannabis Nation Radio.
Check us out at CannabisNationRadio.com and on Facebook at Facebook.com.
You're listening to Cannabis Nation with your hosts, Mike Booten and Julie Rose, right here on LA Talk Radio.